I'm Mark Wilkinson from the James Hutton Institute. I'll be giving this talk today on behalf of crew. Due to a change in the timetable, we're earlier in the day, so actually I'm joined by Jeanette as well, the crew manager, but she shortly has to disappear to the special session on science and policy at the World Water Congress, so you might catch Jeanette slightly over lunch as well. So I'm actually going to be talking about what crew is and how it works, and then go into some detail about projects within crew and how they have delivered impact as well. The final part, look at the evaluation of that and future priorities as well. So it builds on quite nicely from the previous talks and some of the questions, and hopefully I'll help to further answer some of the questions that have been talked about over the past hour. So what is crew? Well, this might be a bit repetitive to some people in Scotland, or some of you here last year, but for the new faces, I just wanted to go quickly over what crew is. The aim of crew is to deliver accessible research and expert opinion to the Scottish Government and its associated partners and end users to help implement policy, short-term policy. So the key statement there is connecting water research, policy and practice. It was established in 2011 and it's Scottish Government funded, and it's a partnership between the James Hutton Institute and the Scottish HEIs. I think the 4 key points about crew to highlight here is demand-driven research. That is, it's the policymakers who come up with the key questions that they need answered. And then the next point here, crew helps to enable this co-production of these questions with, in my next slide, you'll see with the researchers. So this co-production is key. And if you get the co-production right, then the KE becomes quite easy actually. So it makes the KE process, the knowledge exchange, much easier. But the key thing that crew is building networks and skills throughout Scotland between these policy groups, the practitioners and the scientists as well. So how does it work? Well, to go into more detail, it's more about the here and now, the research questions. There's 2 mechanisms here. The first one's call down, and that's when a policy question, there's an urgent policy question that needs answered, that needs this expert opinion and scientific synthesis. And these projects can last months. They're quite quick turnaround. And then there's a second category here of projects, and this is between the more sort of RC UK projects and these short-term projects, and these help to develop the capacity within the policy here. It fits within 3 main policy areas: the Hydronation Strategy in Scotland, Water Framework Directive, Drinking Water and Flood Risk Management Acts as well. Since 2011, £4 million has been spent on 115 projects. And feedback from this, these have been evaluated, has been generally very good, well received by the end users themselves. In that previous slide, I highlighted the end users, I just mention them again. So that's Scottish Government, SEPA, Scottish Water, and SNH, Scottish Natural Heritage. So this diagram on the right here highlights how crew helps to facilitate these links between the universities and the research. And to help with this, crew has just recently established crew champions within universities to help make universities more aware of crew and the process, what research potential projects are out there. I believe crew did a colleague, Emily, did a sort of a scoping study and found 220 water experts in Scottish universities. So there's quite a breadth of people, and hopefully these champions will help to link that to the policy end. And at the policy end, we have these thematic user groups policy asking these questions, the key questions they need, which I'll go into in the next slide now. So, because I'm going to focus mainly on flooding, but crew is not just about flooding. There are 5 distinct categories here, from river basin management planning, sustainable rural communities, drinking water protection, and also the Hydronation Scholar Programme. I'm not going into too much detail, owing to time today on that. And it cross-cuts across these agendas here, but also much larger national cross-cutting policies such as climate change, energy, agriculture, health. So I'm going to focus mainly on the flood risk management side here, of course, because it's a flood risk management conference, but there's other impact associated with these other thematic areas. So the key points leading to impact, if we had to summarize this, how CREW works, I think the first point is that the policy groups identify and prioritize these projects and need. And urgency and importance is key here, so usually the ones which are more urgent and key, the questions get asked, and then that's put towards the researchers. But a key part of this is the steering groups are formed within the project, so this facilitates the communication between the researchers themselves and the policymakers and the end users. And actually, often this process of engagement between the policymakers and the practitioners and the academics is actually can be more important than the outputs. The dialogue, the creation of these new networks, and new ideas, which leads on to the third point, flexibility within projects is something that CREW encourages. And I'll give an example later whereby there's a project idea came up, and throughout the project, a new idea came in, and it triggers a new way of thinking. So flexibility is key here. So if new issues are identified, the projects can be adapted. Again, this point about co-construction between the researchers, and it was mentioned in the last talk, is key between the researchers and the policy as well. We find that workshops are often the most effective way of dissemination. That doesn't have to be a physical meeting. It can actually be just picking up the phone, having conversations, teleconferences. And that's more of a moving away from sort of post-it note type workshops to more dialogue-based workshops we find amongst our sort of end users and researchers. And a final point here, consensus and debate is always welcomed. And I've put here external experts. So in many projects, external experts are being called in from the rest of the UK to come in and help if that knowledge doesn't exist within Scotland. So that gives an overview of CREW. I want to just now go into some case studies. I'm going to give 3 example ones in one slide, one slide for each, and then I'll conclude and put some concluding remarks on. But I think it was a key point in the last project as well about length of reports, because one thing that CREW encourages is very short synthesis reports, and in fact even sometimes 2-page synthesis, because it's a key point. Policymakers tend not to really have the time to go into the details of the VIC report. They want the key facts. So it's not just about producing lots of outputs, it's actually getting those key messages. What is the most important point? So here's an example here of a research synthesis summary. So I'm going to go through 3 projects here and just very briefly mention the main aims and objectives of these, but mainly focus on the impact points. Any questions on these, please do go onto the CREW website, and I think some of the people who've worked on these projects are in the room as well, so I've identified at the bottom. So the first one is about the surface water flood forecasting tool. It was a large project commissioned by CREW to deliver the first UK's first operational surface water flood forecasting tool with a 24-hour leading time. It was successfully piloted at the Commonwealth Games in Glasgow in 2014. It was used towards the end of the event. It utilises the grid-to-grid model, and that's been selected for this pilot application. And it uses nationally available data sets and could be and this transferably approach means could be rolled out nationally. So the key impact point here is it was piloted during the Commonwealth Games. And we have a quote here from the Minister for Environment and Climate Change, quoting his thoughts on this. So the impact it was reached at a high level. But the key point I just want to bring up here is, would this impact have existed if it didn't rain in Glasgow during the Commonwealth Games? Well, for everyone who's been to Glasgow and lives in Glasgow, it always rains in Glasgow, so it was a good pilot to test it in. But so during the cycling there, it was tested and worked very well. So that was a key impact point. And this work was carried out by CEH, Met Office, and the Hutton. So there is sometimes a collation of different types of synthesis report. Here's a range from NFM. And the reason why I put on these is sometimes one report leads to the next question. And these sort of collation of ideas can sometimes trigger new ways of thinking. So within natural flood management, these range of reports have triggered new ways of thinking, and I'm now going to give you 2 examples of ongoing projects within CREW. The first being learning from community-led flood risk management. Now, this is a case study which is focusing in the Karst of Stirling. This catchment previously had a large ecosystem services project which identified user groups, community groups, and one of which formed a few years ago was a one on flooding. So there's a flooding community group, and this flooding community group are really keen to look at measures to reduce flooding in their catchment, because the Karst of Stirling is prone to fluvial flooding, waterlogging. That's not just in the agricultural areas, but also downstream. So the objective of this project is to understand flooding processes and work with the stakeholders to suggest potential measures. So Lindsay and the team have been going out looking at working with the farmers, and came up with 10 measures in conjunction with the farmers, most of which are natural flood management-based approaches. But of course, that key D word, dredging, did come up in the project, and this debate has been going on with the farmers about these measures. What's key about these workshops is the farmers are actually open to all sorts of measures and consensus on this. So a key impact point here is it's actually not just the policymakers with impacts, but this workshop was attended by 58 farmers and community members who came along and had a discussion about these measures and went away with fact sheets and feel sort of empowered about what to do next. And this project's now looking at sort of funding mechanisms to try and help them go forward with this. So it's kind of trying to enable a community there, and this could be looked at in other areas in Scotland as well. So the work's been carried out there with Heriot-Watt University in Hutton. A final project here is the natural flood management land managers' attitude towards it. And the objectives of this project were to survey land managers in the Tweed catchment to look at their attitudes and what possibly incentive measures they need to take natural flood management approaches on. Some measures were dismissed by the farmers. They said we couldn't possibly do that. Some measures were quite accepted, such as riparian planting. And then the project did some economic analysis as well to look at this and suggest potential payment rates and run some scenarios with them. So the key thing is here that this report, this project will help to advise local authorities with potential payment mechanisms and rates for measures. And it also has links to the Scottish Rural Development Payment Scheme. This work was carried out by University of Dundee, Heriot-Watt, SRUC in Hutton. And just finally, there's some more larger projects, but just to run down some other examples of impact. Last year, CREW was asked to help write guidance for the SRDP, which is now, I believe, currently on the Scottish Government website. So you can actually go on, farmers can go on and look at guidance. But this guidance was informed by scientific knowledge and evidence. And a key from the last, I want to back up the point from the last talk, is language is key as well. So taking words such as hydrograph, turning that into a language that a farmer can understand is key in this project here. Another project here is increasing public understanding of water, work carried out by Abertay University and SUDS. So they've been going out with communities, schools, and then trying to increase public understanding of SUDS. And just last year, there was a coastal erosion brief issued for the Minister. The Minister asked a question about coastal erosion here. So that's an overview of impact within CREW projects. CREW is always looking to look at the future priorities. And of course, I didn't mention is CREW doesn't work in isolation. It works very closely with FCERM.net and SNIFR as well. So this was a joint, during the SNIFR Flood Risk Management Conference, and I believe some of you might have been in this event, this side workshop. There was a side workshop to bring the policy practitioner and scientists together in a room and ask this question: what research is needed to support the practical implementation of flood risk management? And I won't go into the detail of all of these, the report will be out shortly, but these are the 5 key areas that were brought up by the working groups. An area here on uncertainty, so communication of uncertainty, an area here on existing assets, communicating with the public, how best to do this. Data, that was basically about, is our hydrometric networks fit for purpose? do we really need real-time data? Is it worth the investment? And a category here, natural flood management as well. So finally, some concluding remarks. So CREW is end-user driven research to answer the policy and practice needs. A key point here is knowledge exchange starts at project inception. In fact, it can start before. It can sometimes start in the previous project. So again, this process of co-construction is key. And CREW is acting to improve the communications between science and policy interface here. So that's the end of the presentation. Any questions?